Welcome to the After Dark podcast, the podcast in which Anthony leads his unknowing friend Konrad by the hand through TV shows. Will Konrad like them? Will Konrad hate them? Will Konrad predict what's going to happen, or will he be lost in the dark? Find out now, only on the After Dark podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the After Dark podcast. I'm Anthony, and that's Konrad.
Hello.
That's him. Well, Konrad, how are you this week?
I'm not bad. I'm trying to think what I've done. It's been a hell of a week of work, but we've had some good. The listeners won't know this. There's no reason why they would. We've had some good D&D sessions this week, and some good other podcasting recording sessions. So I'm hoping to. I don't know if we let them peek behind the curtain. I'm not let them peek behind the curtain. We're recording this later than we normally would, and I'm hoping to go out on a high this week.
Yeah, so this is a Friday. We are currently recording this.
Yeah.
So we've both got that Friday.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah.
So after we record this, we're both going to sit back, have a big, large glass of milk.
Yeah.
That we're going to enjoy this week.
Yep.
We'll do what George Costanza does in Seinfeld, and we're going to take a big chunk out of a big hunk of cheese.
And then
the summer of George.
I can't remember what he says after, like, when he orders the milkshake. To be honest,
George McFly. Yeah. Give me a milk.
Oh, were you talking about George Costanza?
I was talking about George Costanza.
Oh, okay, we completely crossed our streams there, to be honest. But I mean, that's what happens when you're friends with someone like Anthony, who is a fan of both Back to the Future and Seinfeld. There's too many Georges in your pantheon of characters that you like.
It's true, actually, and I'm not going to blame you for assuming I was talking about Back to the Future, because that is most of what I talk about. But yeah, in fact, actually, people did see on the community post on the channel, I once went to a fancy dress party as George McFly's chocolate milk.
I didn't actually see that. Oh wait, no, I did see that. You showed it to me. An excellent costume idea.
Yeah, excellent costume idea thrown together by my wife the morning of. So it wasn't really a great execution on my part. I should have put more effort into it. But all night long, random other friends would go, "Get me a milk, chocolate," and then I'd run over to them.
Yeah, and they take a long swig of you. I'm gonna expand on that no more than I already have done.
Yeah, I know, but it was good fun. Right, okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to get into this episode. You might have noticed it's actually quite a short episode. Now, I'm going to get your opinion on that, Konrad, here before we sort of do all the plugs. What do you think about the fact that randomly we have a half-an-hour episode in the show?
Yeah, I don't, from a production standpoint, I don't really understand why it happened. I feel like narratively there was room for other stuff maybe in this episode, but I mean, as the Bard once said, brevity is the soul of wit. So, this is them cutting right to the core, and I have actually accused the OA of having stuff in its episodes that it doesn't really need to have, like spending too long on certain things. So I guess this is them swinging in the other direction. I don't know why though. I've never known a TV series to have such wild swings in running times. But to be honest, for me, it worked perfectly because I was so busy this week that I was like, oh my god, when am I going to get an hour in to watch the OA? And then you messaged me and said, good news, it's only half an hour this week. I was like, yes. Yeah. But yes, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think the Mandalorian actually is. People always complain about not having enough of it. I think that this show I've talked about before being like a long form film. I kind of feel like when they first wrote the first draft, they just wrote it as like a 400-page film or something. You know, like they didn't actually. That's how I feel about it, because how else would this come in? Now there is actually some structure to the episode, which we'll get into around the Buck character.
Yeah.
Which I'm interested to hear what you think about that. It's not something that I've particularly given deep analysis to be honest with you. But there is definitely something going on in terms of what they're trying to say about that storyline as well as the main one, I suppose. But okay, before we get into the breakdown, then could you make sure you subscribe to the Culture Cave if you haven't already? Give this video a like. It really does help us on audio apps. If you could subscribe to us there as well. Those numbers are ticking up, so thank you very much for the people who are subscribed. Some people are actually shifting across to there, I noticed. So if you are doing that, that's fantastic. If you are doing that as well, though, if you want to still ask Konrad a question or talk to us in general, send us an email at adpodmail@gmail.com. As well as that, we now have a Discord server. So I'm going to put a link in the description below. All the links I've given out so far, Konrad, have expired. But between now and when this goes live, I'll have figured out how to have them go on forever.
Yep.
So there will be a link there. There's already been a lot of discussion about Dark. There's been some discussion about the OA, as well as some movie discussion. So go into that Discord server. It's great fun. All right, let's get into the breakdown. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, let's break it down!
So the episode opens with Buck in his house, and his parents are having an argument.
Yes.
And it seems, actually, they are going to delve a little bit more into Buck's identity, because Buck's father has having trouble changing his mind about his son's relationship, and is wanting to call him Michelle still.
Yeah, and it seems like the source of the argument is Buck's mother is... Well, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it is the cause of the argument, but certainly it is what they are arguing about at the moment that we join it. Buck's mother refers to Buck as Buck, and that seems to incense his dad, who continues to refer to him as Michelle. So the sense I got from it is I say this as a cis white man, but the sense I got from it is that it's kind of exploring an idea that I think a lot of trans people experience, which is that maybe their parents think it's like a phase or something like that they're going to grow out of, as opposed to a legitimate gender identity, which is obviously incredibly hurtful for Buck, who then goes back to the mirror and kind of starts practicing the movements that Prairie has taught them.
So 2 years have passed now. A lot of time going into this basement, to be honest with you. It's a real time sink, this place. But Renat, to tell you what you want about Captivity, it's a real time sink.
I mean, they're a captive audience, one could say. Also, actually, before we go into this scene, I had a question for you. Buck cycles past something that the camera focuses on it, and it looks... I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but it looks like a pile of kind of rubbish marked out with road flares. Did you clock what that was at that point, or is that something I should have paid more attention to?
I don't know if my brain. Yeah, I didn't clock anything of importance. Well, I think there's definitely a fire going on there. I don't know what that's implying, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I also. Yeah, I think we'll wait and see. Maybe they're. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
No, it's
I'm
just
not
the fact
gonna.
that he looks at it. I was like, that seems like it's important,
yeah.
but I don't really understand the significance of it at this point.
Yeah, I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to commit to analysing that at this stage. But so Renata has finally... Renata's got the fourth movement.
Yep, she's involved.
She's involved. And so there's a fair bit of information given out in this little bit. So Renata's NDE... in the NDE, we find out that Renata has a guardian as well. And the guardian said that one of the side effects of travel could be amnesia. Meaning that, when you travel, you'll forget what happened before.
Yeah.
Which throws a whole load of questions in already. They're all practicing the movements. And we also get the revelation that the scars on Prairie's back are also on Homer's back, and they're actually certain movements they're scratching into themselves, so that if they get amnesia when they travel, they'll remember them.
Yeah, and I think we actually join them as Homer, I think, is scratching another one into himself. That was the impression I got from it.
Yeah.
Was that he's in the process of marking himself to do this, which is, that was a theory I had straight out the window there, that it was something to do with angel wings. What an idiot I am for interpreting all this angel talk as literally as all that. Yeah.
Well, it's a strange one, actually, because obviously the scars look like angel wings in a way, and it's very symbolic that they are. But also, so it being symbolic is a real something that came to pass. But but there has been someone with a wing in the
exactly.
show.
I blame Katoon for this. It's her fault, really.
Yeah.
But the thing that really stuck out to me was Prairie describing Renata's guardian, and the implication being that it's not Katoon, which means... by the sounds of things, everyone who's having these NDEs and getting these movements has their own guardian. So I can't wait to see, who the other people's guardians are and what they look like. And interesting that I believe... No, it's in the next scene where we find out about Rachel, actually. We sort of cut back from this scene with the guys in captivity to Prairie talking about kind of expanding on this multiverse theory and like worlds on top of worlds, and the movement allowing you to travel between them. It's a big info dump, this scene, to be honest.
Yeah, huge forking paths, each with coming from each possibility.
Yeah.
We find out later through Hap and Leon talking, it's not quite the multiverse theory.
No.
It's not really that. It's more of like everything starts at one point and branches off as it goes, creating these different realities that are layered on top of each other, and through the movements you can transport between. But the NDEs are actually allowing them to do it temporarily.
She's never done it. She's never done it as well. That's the big revelation from me.
Yeah.
Which when she said that, I was like, I would not have blamed a few people in this room for like being kind of a little bit annoyed at that. It's like, I feel like you've led us down the garden path a little bit here, Prairie. Like you got us invested in the story, only to reveal to us that you've never actually done this thing that you're preparing us to do.
It did actually feel like French was a little annoyed by it.
Yeah, I think French was annoyed by it. He kind of makes a face, and it's like, yeah, fair enough, French.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, like she's literally never done this. There is a moment which I'm not going to unpack this. I said I'm not going to go into the full analysis of the Buck stuff in this episode because I think I'm not necessarily qualified for it. But also, I'll leave that to the fans. But basically, I think that there's something being said about the idea of Buck being transgender, and the idea so Buck asks to touch Prairie's scars. And the idea that when they're almost going to transition to another reality, and the scars are there to remind them of where they came from and what they have to do. So the idea of someone like Buck, who maybe in the future will go through a physical transition, and the idea that he will have scars that will remind him of his past life. I think there's something being said there. Now I'm not going to go hugely really deeply into that, but I think there is something being said there.
Yeah, I think it's certainly telling that Buck is the one that this episode focuses on when they really begin to expand on this idea of physical scars and pursuing a different version of oneself, or I guess for like in a way that's probably truer to Buck, like a more realistic and truthful version of oneself, albeit maybe not the one that you have in this world. So yeah, I think there's definitely something being said there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so there's also a line which has become very popular as sort of a memorable line from in the fandom, and that was Prairie describing going into another, going and sort of traveling to another dimension, I suppose, is like jumping into an invisible current.
Yeah.
And then so there's even someone's even made there's a OA fan series which is on part 4 or something, where they make little short films.
Oh, okay.
I think it's called The Invisible River.
Yeah.
But basically she also says that you need all 5 movements to travel, and you need to do them with perfect feeling. That was an interesting line as well. What do you think she means by perfect feeling?
Well, I think the movements themselves, as they're delivered, are very emotion filled. They're very emphatic. So I think it's potentially the emotion that you put into the movements, and potentially also a state of mind as well, which gives me some hope that the revelation we receive after this, which is that Hap is also learning the movements. It gives me some hope that he won't be able to achieve whatever they're able to achieve, because he hasn't experienced these things himself, and therefore can't associate the correct emotion with them. So I think the emotion or correct feeling is something that they are also bringing back with them from their NDEs, even if they're not sort of explicitly aware of what that is at this point.
Okay, interesting. Also, we do get a line and a shot of Hap where it says every movement they received, the angel hunter received them too.
Yeah.
And then it goes in, and actually it seems like he was telling the truth to the police officer, that he actually does listen to this music to relax.
Yeah, apparently,
because he's listening to it again, and it's going absolute
most
mad.
Incongruous music choice I've ever seen for someone doing these. I suppose it's not really yogic movements. It's a bit more kind of aggressive than that, but it certainly seems weird to be listening to thrash metal while doing these sort of celestial movements.
Did he have his earphones in while?
No, I don't think he did this time, and we'll come back to Hap being caught out by his grubby little earphones later in this episode. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting the way Hap is presented now, in the last episode and in this one, with this very clear separation between him and the prisoners. He wants to be a part of what they're doing, but they've kind of taken over his experiment at this point. and are turning it against him. It's really fascinating to see the sort of shift in the power dynamic.
Yeah, you almost get the sense that if Hap could wish away what he'd done, but still be in the same position where he had these people who could do this, and he could almost be part of the club in a consensual way, he would actually wish that.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this stage.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely what he wishes had happened. I think it's probably the first time. Even I don't think we've necessarily seen him be outwardly contrite, but I think it's inwardly, I get the sense that it's the first time his character has reflected upon the fact that he could have achieved this in a different way, and didn't need to do the monstrous things that he's done to get where he is, and maybe is starting to question himself as a result.
Yeah. Okay. So another year passes since Renata returned with the fourth movement.
Time is flying by.
That's a 30-minute episode, and we've already had 3 years.
3 years have passed. It's ridiculous.
So it's a year since she got the fourth movement, and Rachel. Now, the way Prairie says this could be misleading, I suppose, but she's saying it in present day, i.e., 2016. But she says Rachel was never given a movement.
Yeah.
Do you take that to mean up until that point in the story, or do you take that to mean from 2016 in the past she was never given one?
That's a good point. I think Prairie must know the fifth movement by this point, because otherwise what's she doing gathering this group of people together in the present? So I take it to mean there is going to be something that happens between Prairie escaping this captivity or her situation changing and present day where she learns the fifth movement somehow. I think it's just going to be the case that Rachel is not the one who is given it, because her guardian doesn't want Hap to get the movement and breach the veil between worlds, so to speak.
Okay, interesting. All right, so and actually that brings into a question, maybe a bigger theory question for the end of season 1, possibly, or the end of season. Well, it could be then season 2. It depends how big you want to view this theory as. But you saying that these guardians don't want Hap to get the movements. Are you going to make some sort of overarching theory now about whether or not Hap will ever travel in the show?
I have thought about it. I feel like because it's his most heartfelt desire is to travel at this point. And I feel like for him to achieve it, given it's so rare and so difficult to achieve, and that the kind of theme that they're hitting on at the moment is that he wants the end result without doing any of the work in this case being experiencing the NDEs, like going through the pain of death and rebirth. I feel like his character's going to have to go through some pretty significant changes to get there. He's going to have to sacrifice a lot to achieve that. So I think he will, but I don't think it's going to be soon. If it is, I think it's maybe a end of season 2 kind of thing, if it ever happens.
Okay, all right. Well, obviously, we're not going to commit you to a theory there until you nail down an actual narrow one.
Yeah,
we know how vague theories.
Well, I mean, I thought Prairie was going to get recaptured in this season, and it would be about the boys going on a road trip and painting up a gym with BBA's money to save her. But we've got 2 episodes left of this season, so I don't know where that's fitting into this narrative at the moment.
Okay, awesome. All right, so a little point before we go to the Leon stuff. A little point that I noticed was that, what do you think about Hap cutting all their fingernails?
Oh, I didn't notice that. So is he actually trimming their fingernails, as a kind of in a sort of?
Yeah, while they're under the gas, I assumed it was, or maybe I just missed that little detail.
So he's
having to keep them,
I didn't notice that, to be honest, but my interpretation of that is that it might initially seem like it's a kind of a gentle kind of grooming thing, but actually, realistically, it's probably to make it more difficult for them to mark themselves, because I assume that's how they're cutting themselves, is with their fingernails.
Could be, I think there is also something to the grooming aspect of it too, because we go from that sort of little montagey scene thing where he's cutting their fingernails. It shows him doing that into his conversation with Leon. So it's sort of the dichotomy between him and Leon's view towards their subjects is really highlighted by the fact that Haps going to that length to sort of keep them groomed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, so we meet Leon. What's your impression
Can I
of this
just say
film?
this is classic heel versus heel booking here. You've got to turn one of them face. You've got to turn one of them face, and the way you do that is you have an even bigger dickhead that you introduce in the series. So this is our Triple H turning face moment here because we're introduced to Randy Orton or whatever, which is Leon in this situation. It's an interesting. I really liked this scene. I think it needed to get me back on board actually after it started, because there's some clumsy writing in the beginning where they're walking through the hospital and it's like, okay, two scientist friends, let's figure it out, and Leon says, I told you the same thing when you were my trainee in residency and lost your first patient, which is just like, okay, here comes Captain Exposition here to, give us all the backstory. Like, why are you telling Hap this? Hap knows this. He was there with you. Like, you're just saying this for my benefit. So the writing starts off a bit clumsily, but then I really like the way the characterization goes from there. So you've got these two guys who are, it's almost like a boys' night out. You know, they're like, it looks like they're kind of filling baguettes with like chips or, crisps and drinking beer over what looks, I mean, there's a morgue next door. So presumably this is an operating table for cadavers, like where they would perform autopsies.
It's the abandoned morgue.
Yeah.
That's what
So it's like this incredibly grim setting, and they're like drinking beer and discussing their experiments. And Leon, there's this kind of underlying tension between them, and this sense of kind of friendly professional competition, which obviously becomes less friendly as the scene goes on. But it's a classic way of, I don't know if I want to say it reframes Hap's character, but I feel like it's the show saying like, look how much of a bastard he could be. Like, this guy kills his patients after, I don't know if he actually says how long he keeps them.
Well, frequently anyway.
Yeah, like he just kills them because he doesn't want to get attached to them, which is like, that's like, I don't want to get into like grading monstrous acts, but that's like really up there in terms of like industrialized murder in scientific experiments, to be like, yep, I don't want to form any human attachment to these guys, so I kill them after 6 months or whatever and get new ones. And I think it's a great way of showing us another side of Hap's character, or not necessarily another side, but reaffirming this side of Hap's character we've seen, where he is capable of kind of doing things to make himself feel better about himself, even if at his core he is still doing effectively the same thing that Leon is doing.
Yeah, I find that really heinous as well. Like, I think you're exactly right about the heel versus heel booking. It's like, literally, I got the impression that although August died, I did get the impression that was an accident due to the experiment.
Yeah.
I don't think Hap has ever killed someone because he wants. Oh, he kills them all the time, you know what I mean? But he's never actually killed someone for good because he wanted to. No. Whereas this guy is just like, high turnover, potassium chloride, and into the incinerator. Absolute, just like, monster. Psychopath.
And there's stuff like, there's a line, I believe it's a quote from someone, I'm not sure who it is he's quoting, but there's no line between good and evil, only what a man can stand, which is one of the most troubling depictions of morality I've ever heard from a scientist, because it's just, essentially humanity makes its own sense of morality by what each individual is able to put up with, which in Leon's case seems to be some pretty depraved stuff.
Yeah, and like, Leon also gave advice to Hap along those same lines, where he said, discover what you can, destroy the evidence, and turn a profit before you can no longer forget what you've done.
Yeah, and
it really like was like, that's it. If you're doing this and his motivation is just money.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's that's the worst part about it. Is it's not even just like, it's not even just that he's doing it. It's that his motivation for doing it is financial gain. It's like, you're not even like, the idea, and it's also kind of shows his short-sightedness as well. Like, the idea that you would discover the afterlife or prove the existence of the afterlife, and then you'd be like, cha-ching, cha-ching. Like, do you understand how seismic that change is that you've just discovered? And he's like, I'm gonna write myself a book about how I discovered the afterlife. Like, it's just the most narrow-minded individual. But fortunately, he doesn't stick around for long.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get into him not sticking around for long, I love the segue, but I am not going to go there yet.
Absolutely. This was me. I'm sorry, audio
parry
listeners.
it away.
This was me doing the old volleyball. Like as I bumped it up for you. I can't remember what that's called in volleyball, but I was waiting for you to spike it.
Spike.
And you've just
spike is what you do after. Yeah,
you've just rejected it.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna parry it away, and I'm gonna say because there was a lovely little bit of Copernicus talk, and I'm not talking about the dog from Back to the Future. I'm talking about the scientist himself. So Hap says, or philosopher I should say, that he realizes their work. So you talking about like the monetary gain, but Hap definitely thinks about his work as a paradigm shift. He says, and he says, but he always wonders, would Copernicus have continued his work to show that the Earth is not the center of the solar system if it meant experimenting on human beings? Interesting question. Probably the answer is yeah. I think. I mean, we can't assume Copernicus was a psychopath.
I think the reality of that question is that human history is littered with people who experimented on human beings to, achieve some kind of advancement. It's like the idea of, I don't want to say this with authority actually, because I'm not an authority, but my understanding of it is that the idea of morality being introduced into science is a relatively recent thing. Like, we're talking last couple of 100 years. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting ethical question. To what cost are you prepared to pay to advance, the course of human history?
Yeah, but we're also talking about direct human life cost. Yeah. Whereas I would say most scientific, huge scientific discoveries or scientific advancements do actually have people die as a result of them. You just look at like all the energy advancements in the world. How many people have died of fossil fuels and everything like that? I think that it is a case where most scientific advancement in those scales anyway, has some sort of cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it always has to be weighed up. Okay, so we're going to move into now. We're not going to mention everything because obviously Hap's just repeating a lot of what Prairie's already told us. But Hap reveals to Leon about the idea of these forking paths and multiple realities, and talks about the technology of movement, which I thought was a nice way to put it, that allows them to travel and stay in other dimensions. And also Hap says he knows where they go, which is we'll come back to later on. And Hap says he couldn't care less about money. And I want to actually talk about something here which I've always had in my mind, right? Have you ever noticed this? That in America, now maybe some people over here do it too because of American influence, but do you notice how over here, like in this part of the world, we would say, I couldn't care less.
Yeah, it's a bugbear.
But in America, they say, I could care less. And that always annoys me.
Listen, language is organic. It's changing all the time. I'm not going to prescribe to anyone how they should talk, but could care less never really makes sense to me, because the whole point is that you physically couldn't care less than you do, which means you care a zero amount. But that's such is language.
Well, actually, it goes further than that, Konrad, because they not only say in America, I could care less, but they also use the other way around for things like, so if I was gonna try and jump over a hurdle, right?
Yep.
I would say, I'll see if I can do it.
Yeah.
But in America, they say, I'll see if I can't do it.
Well, that raises all kinds of questions about the mentality of the person doing it. That's like the sort of prove me wrong, typical American attitude that, like, let's see if I can't do this, and but they know they can.
But that is a bugbear of mine as well. It's always annoyed me. Every time I see it in a TV show or film, I'm screaming at the screen saying, "You couldn't care less. If you could, what do you mean you could care less? Get out of here!" But anyway, that's what it is. Hap says that. He says he could care less about making a profit. Which for me and my UK and Ireland ears tells me that he actually does want to make a profit.
Well, I believe him though. To be fair, when he says he could care less, meaning he couldn't care less, I believe that's the case for Hap. He's got his mind. He doesn't need anything else.
Yeah, we're doing deep analysis. Yeah. We understand what those words mean.
To the language.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Leon just casually is like, "Hey, go and have a look in that other room. Go and look in number 20 there." he goes go and open the cold chamber, and like he's so cool about it. He's eating his crisp sandwich or whatever he's got. And then Hap goes in, and the purple liquid's there. That's one thing that's interesting. It must stop the smell of a dead body or something.
Yeah, it's gonna be like formaldehyde or something. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know enough about preserving bodies, and you can't prove different, internet. But I'm assuming it's like, do they still use formaldehyde? I don't know what that does really. I just know of it as like a thing to do with bodies. But
one thing I know is that diet soft drinks cause formaldehyde to be in the brain. That's why I stopped drinking them.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should stop drinking them. I mean, there's other reasons as well, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Anyway, basically Leon then comes in with a little gun, does the old Klaus,
brings the gat in,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got the gun, and he's gonna shoot him dead, but he doesn't get a chance. Hap actually fights him off and eventually kills him.
Yeah. I question the sense in this plan. You know, like they've said it's like, you know, an abandoned morgue in the hospital, but I mean, presumably people are still close enough to hear a gunshot. Like gunshots aren't. He
must have some soundproofing.
Yeah, I guess so. But there's one thing that happens in this scene that really annoyed me, which is that to my eyes, Hap got shot in one of his ears with the first shot. Because he kind of goes like that and like grabs the side of his head. The next scene, there was no wound in either of those ears, and the reason it annoyed me is because as soon as it happened, I wrote down, "Oh no, Hap's ears won't be able to take his disgusting sticky earphones now that he's been shot." But apparently he can. Apparently he can still. So we've been robbed of that joke. You can blame the writers of this show, listeners, for
maybe throughout the scientific investigation into his ears and the saliva in people's ears, maybe his saliva is actually like has a healing property.
Yeah.
And when he sucks it and puts it in his ear, it actually causes it able to be regenerated.
Yeah, or it's like bulletproof. It's like it forms like a kind of hard crust on his ear that is capable of deflecting all but the strongest of forces. But either way,
I think that's probably it.
That sounds right. But either way, he drowns Leon in formaldehyde. So bye, Leon.
Yeah, he drowns him.
Gone but not forgotten.
Bye. Yeah, formaldehyde in the brain for you, Leon. But basically, Basically, what do you think about Hap's disguise?
Oh my god!
On the way,
as soon as I saw it, I was like, Hap disguise. I've got this down, and you can check the tape, listeners. This is in my notes right now. Hap's disguise as he leaves the hospital is some Weekend at Bernie's shit, because like he looks like a corpse that is being operated by someone else, like this scarf around his mouth to hide the fact that his jaw is broken, and like sunglasses on askew as he like walks out the hospital.
I thought he was going to be like two children. Like,
it could also be two children in a trench coat. He does not look like a real human being in this disguise, and he's also just. It's odd that I guess it's not odd. I'm still trying to like kind of get my head around him telling the nurse or the hospital employee that like to go and help the people in the morgue, because I don't know, to be able to do that and then go back to experimenting yourself, I feel like that feels like a bit of a road to Damascus moment for me. Like there's no real turning back from that moment. Once you've so actively confronted the fact that you morally disagree with someone else's experiment when it's so close to what you're doing, I'll be interested to see where he goes from here. But I feel like if he just goes straight back into his experiments, that might ring a bit hollow to me.
Well, I think we did see him talking to Prairie, didn't we?
Yeah, we do. That's true.
And basically saying, "Come away with me." That was maybe him confronting those things. But then once she said no, he was like maybe that's enough to get him back into the mode. You know what I mean? Like because
maybe.
I think he very much was gonna leave. Like if she said yes, he was gonna leave. I don't know what he would have done with the rest of them. Don't know.
Probably nothing good.
Probably nothing good. Like let's be honest.
Sent Homer back to Cuba and just be like, I don't know, hang out here.
yeah, exactly. So but he takes Prairie, offers her that. She says no. Good on her. And then, but she actually Prairie is actually second guessing that later on when she says I could have got yous released. I could have went with him and got yous released. It's also interesting. I don't believe Hap when he says that his plan would have been to go and heal the rich and famous, because we already know that he's not in it for money.
Yeah.
So I think he probably was just like saying he wanted to go and reset up somewhere else just in case they find him, but he wanted to take Prairie because he doesn't want to lose her.
Yeah, I don't believe that he's suddenly turned into this kind of like rampant capitalist overnight. He knows he needs to leave, and he wants to take Prairie with him, as you say. And I also think we see a bit of Hap's egotism in this scene with Prairie, when he has like the gall to tell Prairie that he knows what she wants, as if he is at all familiar with her. It's a really, really distasteful bit of dialogue, which I liked. I don't want to give the impression I don't like distasteful dialogue. I felt like it was perfect coming from him. But it's really like captured that kind of slimy, kind of insidious, authoritative streak he has in him, where he's like, I know what you want. I know what's best for all of you, even if you might not appreciate it at the moment. And also this is the scene where we see his ear isn't shot, which I was disappointed about, to say the least.
Well, you either be disappointed or you just be very happy that his regenerative procedures are going well with the saliva.
We do get the horrible gel sounds in this as well, with Prairie like gelling her own hair up, which
honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. I understand the whole idea of the setup of the experiment. Like, I understand the whole the setup, and like how businesslike it was, and how she was just like, I'm here to do my work just like you are. I really liked it. But the idea of having to put gel on your head to help the thing go over easier, I'm just looking at that fabric and I'm thinking, that's the same stuff wetsuits are made out of. Like, that's gonna go over. Like,
you don't need to do this. It's there's something fetishistic about that gel, as far as I'm concerned.
Stop rubbing your saliva. He's getting her to do it herself at this point.
That's disgusting. Not a fan.
Like, how does putting it in their ears have anything to do with having it go over them?
Yeah, I saw someone say in the comments a couple of weeks ago that the thing that killed Scott might be like microphones to kind of pick up what they're hearing in their NDEs, which makes sense. But yeah, the gel to me is just needless sexuality in this. It's like, let me just rub some gel on you, and like
yeah, like we want it to go over your head, so it's got to go in those ears. It's got to be inside the ear is where the wetsuit touches the most.
Disgusting, man.
Really strange. I tell you what, say one thing about his experiments. This saliva business is really strange.
This is when the FBI catch him and put the case together. This will be the first point in court with a bullet. Just like, look at this weird shit he was doing with gel with it. Like, if nothing else proves that this man was in this purely for sexual arousal and his own gain, look at these recordings of him rubbing gel all over these poor people's ears.
Yeah, I love the idea of him sitting in a coffee shop or something, and the reason why the FBI comes and gets onto him is because someone sees him sucking his earphone.
It's got to be him, officer. No one else in the known universe does that with their ears.
Yeah, there's something going on. All right, okay. So Prairie is getting into the machine. She's very businesslike, as I say. It's really interesting as well. Whenever she is finally put and starts to drown, like, she's real. Like, her heartbeat doesn't budge for a very long time.
She's like super calm.
Just she's super calm until obviously when you start to actually drown, it's going to speed up.
Yeah.
But basically, that happens. I also think there's a few bits of visual imagery going on. I'm sure, visual imagery, it's just imagery, isn't it? So basically, when she's sitting in the machine from the back, it very much looked like angel wings before it closed over her. Also, as we go out, we've been talking about the shape of this little lab area he's got going on. As it went out and the lights all around were dark and she was in the middle of it, it looked to me like an eye. So maybe it's to symbolize that he's like they're seeing into their NDEs. You know what I mean?
I think it's if nothing else, it's just a really good bit of set design for framing, because it draws the eye inwards to the subject at the center of it with this like kind of like this. Oh, I guess it's cylindrical, but it's like kind of hexagonal because it's got straight edges, but it's octagonal or whatever. But it's there's negative space around them that draws the eye inwards, and I think there probably is something to that as a visual metaphor for looking beyond through this sort of mechanical eye
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so she gets drowned. She goes into the starry room where she usually meets Katoon, but Katoon is not there. And it's all a bit chaotic. So basically, when she comes out of it again, Hap takes her into a room and says, "Did you hear a sound there?" And he plays her a few sounds, and he plays her the sound. He plays a particular sound, and she says, "Yeah, that's it. Take me back to my cell." Yeah. And she's like, "Yeah, okay, so you recorded my NDE, whatever." But it actually wasn't a recording of his NDE. It was a recording of sound waves. It's waves of electrons captured in plasma in the rings of Saturn.
Yeah, which I hope is real. I don't know enough about astrology to know whether astronomy. I always get them mixed up. Which one's the one that's not bullshit?
Astronomy.
Astronomy's the one that's not bullshit, right? That's right. He heard the sound of Pisces calling out across space. So I don't know.
You are that star, Simba.
Yeah, great. So I don't know enough about astronomy to know whether this is actually true, and there are like recordings of sounds from the rings of Saturn. But if that is true, that's really fucking cool. I would also like to point out that when Prairie first went to Katoon's Baba Yaga hut, I said, and you can check the tape on this again, listeners, that it reminded me a lot of Nessus in Destiny 2, and Nessus is a centaur very close to Saturn. So when he said this is a recording of the Rings of Saturn, I was like, motherfucker. All right, so I was going back through the theory matrix. I'm not going to give away what I gave myself for that one, but I had to spend a long time soul searching on how I thought I was going to score myself for that one. Is all I'll say for now.
That is interesting to me because it almost is as if, now I'm convinced of this really, but it's almost as if the inspiration for that part of this show and for that part of the game Destiny 2 came from the same place. You know what I mean? So,
I have to believe they did, because literally the colours are the same, the kind of mossy bluish rocks with really bright green, they're literally the same. So I don't know what the source for that is. I'd be really interested to find out whether there was a shared source, but they must be, or maybe there is some kind of theory about what the surface of like the asteroids in the rings of Saturn. Well, I guess it can't be the asteroids because none of them have atmosphere, so it must be. But Saturn's a gas giant, right? I actually can't remember if Saturn's a gas giant. I think it is.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Yeah, so it must be like the bigger.
All the 4 outer planets are gas giants.
Yeah, so it must be like the bigger asteroids or something within the ring itself. And there must be, I don't know, some kind of theory about them having atmosphere or something. But either way, yeah, they definitely have a shared aesthetic that must be pulled from somewhere.
Must be, yeah. That's what I think as well. Okay, so so actually, what do you think about that in terms of her? Do you think she actually was physically there, like Hap's saying? Like, what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's difficult. That is difficult, because I think the way Prairie is talking about it in the present day, with this idea of like kind of this current whipping you to a world that sits on top of your own world but is slightly different, makes me think that it's unlikely that NDEs are just taking you to a different place within the same world. They must be taking you to another timeline. But I guess it's possible that, you know, I don't want to say timeline because I don't want to confuse the terminology too much here, but taking you to another world, I guess it's possible that she's being taken to another world in which humanity is on Saturn or something bizarre like that, or has colonized the rings of Saturn or something like that. So I think she probably was there, but I don't think it's going to be a case of like, oh, she could jump in a rocket and fly for 3 years or whatever and turn up at the rings of Saturn, and Katoon's just there on like a telescope being like, hello. Like, I think there's probably a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Like, my mind went to something like, when I first saw it, it was like, okay, so if there's forking paths from all the realities, maybe the reality in which she was in with Katoon on Saturn is like a reality where the formation of the planets was slightly different.
Yeah, totally, exactly. I mean? Yeah, I think it's got to be something like that. I don't think that Katoon has Wallace and Gromit a grand day out did this, and she's like visited Saturn to find some cheese, and then she's gonna fly back.
Yeah. Yeah, well, how did her dad get there? That's what I want to
Yeah.
know.
Just hanging out. He just swam through space.
Yeah.
The humans have gills that work in space in that reality. So there's, jump. If you jump high enough off the planet, you can just swim out of the gravitational pull.
Well, in that reality.
Yeah, in that reality.
Anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there we go. That we're sort of one or two things left in this episode, I suppose. Well, first thing is that Homer sort of has to talk Prairie around because she almost wants to give up. And Homer does a lovely story, and it made me really... I'm falling in love with Homer, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He had this lovely story where he was talking about the fact they're going to have a garden and they're going to plant vegetables. And Owe was like... I don't want to plant vegetables. I love that.
Yeah.
I just love that. First of all,
she's
it's like
she's so
says,
literal. Like she doesn't does not understand the metaphor that Homer is delivering at all here.
Yeah, it's like no, I want to play video games. I don't want to plant garden. But I just love that. Like even in this dream state of looking forward to the future, she's like, no.
Yeah.
So basically, Homer's like, well, you're right. Like we're really bad at it, so. We fail, and then we'll try again.
Yeah.
We fail, and we'll try again. It was like a real obvious metaphor, obviously, and eventually won her around. And I just thought, Homer, you charmer, you.
Yeah.
Also, I thought it was interesting. Homer does actually seem to know a lot about gardening.
He does. Yeah, he kind of understood... Well, I guess because he was doing it and failing for so long. He did it once. It didn't work because they were too close together. Then he spread them out, but then mites got them. And then he put those weird other plants in between them to keep the mites away, and it worked. So, He's learned through trial and error, which I think is the way you learn anything.
Yeah,
or maybe he's just
exactly.
he's a keen botanist now.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was nettles he put in the middle.
Nettles,
he knows so much. But anyway, so it was nice to see Oe getting back on side and not sort of giving up, which is nice. It was interesting that. In this episode, there was a little bit of that, like her saying, she was questioning herself, saying, "I should have went with him and got used free." And then here, she's sort of almost to the point where she's like, "Oh, it's not going to work. We're not going to get the fifth movement, all this other thing." It's the first time that her sort of conviction has been shaken.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because in the present day, in 2016, her conviction is there again.
Yeah.
So it's just a little wobble,
Yeah, I think her having it. And not having an NDE, not finding Katoon, combined with the fact that for 2 years they've been trying to get the fifth movement and failing because Rachel has never been given it, probably gives her a sense of abandonment. Like, she's at the end of her kind of tether at this point and thinks, well, we're never going to get it. Katoon has effectively abandoned me here because Katoon doesn't want me to have the fifth movement. So, what's left for us to do? I think that's probably how she's feeling, which makes me think that there is going to be a development at some point in the next 2 episodes that reaffirms her commitment to the plan.
Okay, interesting. So 2 more things. First thing is, police officer comes in and finds Hap in the act.
Yeah, Hap just not... He doesn't seem to have his head screwed on straight. He has left his front door open while he's listening to the Rings of Saturn. I think he's listening to the Rings of Saturn sounds. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And just surveying his captives. And yeah, the guy just walks up behind him and points a gun at him. I think I don't like playing backseat scriptwriter or showrunner, but if I were writing this show, I would have him kill this cop in the next episode, because you establish sympathy for the cop through he's got a sick wife, and you establish that Hap has some sympathy for the cop as well. Then you have the inciting incident of Hap's own arc, if you like, where he has to kill Leon because Leon pulls a gun on him, and now Hap has basically a choice to make. He can go one of 2 ways. He can either turn himself in willingly, give it all up, accept that he was wrong, and accept the punishment for it, or he can double down on what he's done and kill the cop or take the cop prisoner, I guess. But I think he'll probably kill the cop, and I think that's going to be where he goes in the next episode. I don't see them redeeming Hap. I think he's going to double down on being a shit.
Okay, very interesting. All right, so last thing is just a little note in the Buck storyline of this episode is at the very end, Buck's dad realizes that the door's been left open, goes out, is calling Michelle. Michelle finally then says, Buck.
Yeah, and then closes the door, which I still don't really understand the significance of Prairie telling them all those episodes back to leave the door open when they come to congregate in the abandoned house. But that seems like maybe that's symbolizing that Buck is going to be closed off from the rest of this group somehow. That was my interpretation of that. That could prove to be entirely wrong though.
Okay, interesting. Do you want to get into the round?
Yep, let's do it.
IMDb rating 8.2.
I think it's hard with this one because it's so short that it's almost like it's hard to judge it against the others. I think there wasn't a bad scene in this one, but again, there was a lot less scenes. I think this is probably the best episode so far though, in terms of kind of pound for pound what you got out of it. So I'd probably say it's in the mid 8s. Maybe like an 8.5 or something.
Yeah, last one was 8.5, and you agreed with it. So yeah, I think I found with this, it's definitely growing up as you go through it. You're enjoying each one a little bit more than the last, which is good because it means hopefully that when we get to the end of the seasons, it'll give you that big can't wait for the next season feeling.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Right. Do you have anything in general? What theories do you have coming out of this one? I'm sure you mentioned a couple there. Did you put any theories in the Matrix for this episode?
I'm actually trying to remember if I did. So hold on. What do we do? 1.6. So yeah. So I suppose the big one is that all these characters are getting their own version of Katoon, which I can't wait to. Well, I say their own version of Katoon, their own Guardian. So I can't wait to see that. I guess the minor ones are. I think that cop's dying in the next episode, or the next time we see Hap in any meaningful way. I've been burned by that before. It could be that we just don't see Hap next episode. I think that. So
is that are you being very like insular with that theory? You're saying the cop will die next episode?
Yeah, I think Hap is going to be arrested. The guy's going to try and arrest Hap. There's going to be a struggle. I think the cop is going to die as a result of the struggle, and possibly that's going to prompt something which will let the others escape, or let Prairie escape, or something like that.
But what does the theory say? Are you being that detailed in the theory?
I haven't actually written it down yet because I haven't put it in the Matrix, but I think I probably will. It'll make it. I know I've been burned by making super hyper specific theories before. Maybe I'll just say the cop is dying in the next episode.
Well, you've also made theories like that before as well.
That's true, yeah. But
that's the big one for the next
You've got like a kindly sheriff with a sick wife who is friends with a man who is secretly a monster. There's no way that cop makes it alive to the end of this show. I've seen enough movies to know which way that relationship's going.
Okay, one more question then before we get into the the questions from YouTube comments. Yep. Is this question here? Where do you see, with 2 episodes to go, where do you see the end of this season? Like, what do you think is going to happen at the end of the season? Like, what's the closing moments?
I think Prairie. I stand by it. I think Prairie is getting abducted again. I think the boys have got to be. So who we've got? French, BBA, Buck, Steve, and Jesse. Jesse?
Yeah.
So you've got the 5 there. The 5 for the 5 movements. So Prairie is kind of surplus to requirements, narratively speaking, in that group. So I think Prairie is getting abducted in some way, or she's getting put in a dangerous situation, and the boys are going to have to be like, right, we need to take what we've learned and go and help. I don't exactly know what form that's going to be, whether it's going to be, Hap rolling out of the current to another world where humans live on Saturn and being like, ha, gotcha, and then yanking her into another world, or something like that, or whether it's going to be him, rolling up in a car and kidnapping her again. But I think there has to be something to put Prairie in danger again, because she has established this relationship with the boys, where they all, and boys and BBA, where they all care about her. So in order to kind of spur them to action, I think something needs to threaten her to prompt that.
Okay, interesting. All right, let's get into the YouTube comments then.
Cool, let's do it.
A stranger from the outside.
As always, guys, if you want to leave comments for Konrad for next episode 7 of Season 1 of the OA, put them in the comment section of this YouTube video, or email us at adpodmail@gmail.com. Right, Konrad, now, I will say before we start, you might notice that people who are commenting, you might notice that I have missed out some comments. because we're sort of putting him in the same episode, I am being very selective now. But at the same time, if we've sort of answered your question already, I'm not really asking it unless I think there's merit in talking about it again. That makes sense, I think. Okay, so first question comes from Venla. And Venla is a Konrad, just to let you know, because this question comes from one concerned Konrad to another.
Oh, okay.
Where is Katoon?
She was just hiding. She was just hiding. Like she was in the fish. She was in the bird fish pool, just with her head under the water, but with like one of those like bamboo sticks that like you can breathe through, like in a spy movie. I mean, look, she has the power to give people their eyesight back or take people's eyesight away. There's more to Katoon than meets the eye. I think I think all of the Guardians can choose when they want to be seen and met, and when they want to, not be available. So I think she simply chose. I think she's still there, but I think she simply chose not to be visited or not to be present for Prairie in this particular situation.
Okay, awesome. Question from Archbase to Rennie. For Konrad, will there be consequences for Hap following his encounter with his scientific colleague?
Well, I think that is kind of what we're getting to with the cop arresting him, because I think his carelessness is as a result of that encounter. I don't know if it'll necessarily that like specifically the fact that he has killed Leon and revealed that Leon's experiment is going on will have repercussions so much as the combined weight of all of Hap's actions will eventually catch up with him. But I think certainly the cop even getting into his house without him being aware of it is a repercussion of that, because his mind was in other places.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, we're going to do two more. First is going to come from Ted Vic Disco.
Okay.
Great discussion as always, guys. Thank you. Just finished watching episode 6. Question for Konrad. Now, I want to focus on the second half of this question, but I'm going to read the whole thing. It's obvious that Hap's colleague killed him out of jealousy, but do you think there was another reason? That's the first half. The second half I'm a little bit more interested in. Do you think that his patients were obtaining the same dance moves, or are these moves strictly a phenomenon experienced by Prairie's group?
No, So I think it was jealousy, but I also think it was opportunism. I think Leon demonstrated that he's in it for the money. He's very short-sighted, and Hap's success could potentially mean that Leon's theory is disproven before it even gets off the ground, and that impacts Leon's ability to make money off of it. So I don't think he was trying to kill Hap because he wanted to steal his research so much as he didn't want competing theories that could potentially impact his success. In terms of the movements,
okay,
I think it's notable that people aren't getting these movements the first time they have an NDE. And I also think Leon's research is short-sighted enough that he's not giving his subjects the kind of freedom in inverted commas that Hap is giving them. There's no discussion between them by the looks of things. It seems like they're just passed out in more containers and occasionally subjected to a near-death experience. So I don't think they're learning the movements, or if they are, I think they're forgetting them as soon as they're brought back from the NDE, because they're not able to express the kind of the physicality and the emotion they have been given during their NDE. I think there has to be my read of it when you compare the two experiments is there has to be some kind of period where you're able to kind of express what you've just experienced in order to carry those movements out of the NDE.
Okay. Awesome. And the last question comes from Bill Ross, and Bill says, how did the OA learn about the Leon details to retell it to the kids? Was she just making it up, or was it based on her suspicions?
That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I think she's going to find it out in the next couple of episodes. I think Hap is going to kill the cop or compromise his experiment in some way that forces him to like pack up and leave, and I think he's going to confide something in Prairie before he does, and that's how she'll get the information on Leon. I can't see her figuring that out herself. She's going to have a conversation with Hap for her to get that information.
Okay, and Bill adds a little extra question or comment here. Says, from day one of freedom, why hasn't she tried to contact the families of the captives? I've never heard a convincing answer to that. I just want to say, first of all, before you have a little think there, I just want to say, this type of question, now I'm sure Bill doesn't mean it this way, I'm sure not, but this is the type of question that I get all the time on TV shows where people are almost putting it across as an issue with the writing or a plot hole in some way. I'm not saying Bill's saying that, but this is the type of question I hear a lot in that regard. And in my mind, yes, we can analyze it and talk about why she didn't, but the fact of the matter is, it is not unrealistic for a human to make a decision you disagree with. You know?
I think that's a crucial part of this to me. I think it's not that the way she's spoken about it. I don't know if Bill knows. I don't know if he's a Konrad or an Anthony. From what she has said, it sounds like they're not on this plane of existence anymore. It's not a case that they're still trapped in a basement somewhere. They're somewhere else. So, and she's very cagey about revealing any of her experience to the FBI or the authorities in general, because I would assume the worry is that they're like, well, that they would hear her and say, well, she's clearly insane. She needs to be locked away, and she loses her opportunity to save them. I think that's probably her concern with getting in contact with the families of Scott, Rachel, Homer, and Renata as well. It's like, what are you going to write to them? Like, dear Mrs. Homer, he's in another dimension. Can't say more. Trust me. Speak soon. Yeah. Like, it's not. It's not.
Trust me. I don't know where he is. but trust me. Yeah. But also, like, I think that is an answer which hopefully will satisfy Bill. My answer as well is like that as well, but at the same time, it's also, she still in her mind is part of that group, has a mission. Like, best case scenario, those people are not going to go back to their families. That group of 5 committed to going to another plane of existence. They've already left their families behind, and that's probably why there's a lot of caginess and coldness between Prairie and her parents, because in her mind she was never going to see them again, and in fact that, like, her freedom didn't involve them.
Yeah, she doesn't want to go back to that life anymore, and I think she thinks that the other 4 don't want to go back to their lives either, because it's like I don't know, like, I guess it's the equivalent of, like, moving to a really big city from a tiny village out in the middle of nowhere and then trying to go back to that village in the middle of nowhere. It's just like you might want to do it at some point, but the scope is so much smaller, and it's just, when your eyes are open to all those possibilities, it's very hard to go back to what you knew before. And I think that's probably how she feels. So yeah, I don't view it as a flaw in either the writing or her character to not immediately get in touch with the families, because I think she's not that interested in it. Like, it doesn't cross her mind to do it. And what would you say if you did?
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, thanks very much for your questions. More questions next week, I hope. Right, there we go. Conrad, last thoughts before we give our plugs and go?
It's getting good. It's getting good. That's all I'll say about this show. There's still a couple of moments where the writing's a bit clunky, but generally speaking, we've got some momentum behind us, got some inertia behind us, and I'm enjoying the run into the close of season 1.
Lovely. All right, guys, make sure you subscribe to The Culture Cave on YouTube, as well as the audio apps for the podcasts. Could you also please like the video? That would help us a lot. If you want to join the Discord for some chat about Dark and movies and the OA and all sorts of stuff, there's a link in the description. I think that's probably all I'm going to say. ADPodmail if you want to send us an email. You can also buy a t-shirt, link in the description of the After Dark podcast. I'm thinking possibly of adding an extra design to that shop, Konrad. Maybe a little jackpole. Who knows? Possibly something to do with the jackpot.
We'll have to give Bartos a cut for that, though.
I haven't even thought about it yet, but immediately my mind goes to Bartos's head on in a slot machine where it's like 3 Bartoses in a row.
That's a great idea.
Jackpot. All right, guys, that's us. Thanks very much for joining us this week. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. The After Dark podcast has been a Culture Cave production. Please subscribe on audio apps as well as on YouTube at The Culture Cave. Join us next week as Konrad journeys further into the unknown.